It began in 2003. New Line Cinema released a movie called Freddy vs. Jason. It was a long-awaited, long-requested, long-developed movie ever made. People flocked to see two of the big horror titans clash to the death. In attendance was a young filmmaker from Denver, Colorado, named Hank Braxtan. In 1998, he served in the United States military as an intelligence analyst and was honorably discharged in 2004. After leaving the Army, he spent a very short time in film school and made a good number of short films. At that time, the internet was providing us with fan films, or movies that were made by fans of a certain film. But the majority of the fan films were mostly Star Wars. Braxtan, being a huge fan of the 1984 classics, felt that there should be a decent fan film to represent both Ghostbusters and Nightmare on Elm Street. Braxtan wrote the first draft of the script and sent it to a friend of his named Tim Johnson. Within 3 days, Johnson rewrote the entire script. The basic concept is that a young man named Neil Anderson, played by J. Michael Weiss, is being preyed upon by Freddy Krueger in the dream world. Now, Neil lives with his slacker roommate, Chuck, in an apartment in Denver. He also has a close connection to a young lady named Nancy Ashton, who is Chuck's girlfriend for some reason. Neil is then sent to pick up some old friends of his, Eugenio Fitzpatrick, played by Jason Cook, and Ed Spangler, nephew of Egon Spangler, played by the co-writer Tim Johnson. When they stop at a bar, they discover that the place is haunted, and they suit up using the spare uniforms worn by the Ghostbusters of New York.
Why do I get the messed up uniform? They're hand-me-downs. So? Why do I get the hand-me-down that looks like a ghost wiped his ass with it? It's ectoplasm.
And they manage to catch Slimer. Once he's caught, they become worldwide phenomenons, and, well, you get the idea. Anyway, the idea of one of the Denver Ghostbusters being related to the New York Ghostbusters was, I thought, a pretty clever idea, and they managed to pay reference to it in the background of Ghostbusters 3, or Ghostbusters the video game. Not bad for a fan film. The proton packs were all built from scratch, and I only have this to say, I have got to get me one of those. But the production wasn't without its problems. At the second shoot of the movie, they filmed the climax between Freddy and the Ghostbusters. It was scheduled for 6 p.m. to about 2 in the morning. They shot from 10 p.m. to 5 in the morning. The reason for this was because of the problems with the Freddy makeup, and one actor had to be replaced after another one dropped out. The proton beams were accomplished using ULEAD Video Studio Pro video paint and Adobe After Effects, all painted by hand by Hank Braxtan himself. Slimer was a puppet, shot against black, and then added using After Effects. The Freddy makeup was done by Chris Sitabaka, who managed to make a pretty good attempt at recreating the iconic look of Wes Craven's Boogeyman. When it was released on the internet, it had 20,000 downloads on its first weekend alone. It was hosted by the Force.net, and at the Micro Cinema Festival in South Dakota, Freddy vs. Ghostbusters was named Best Fan Film and has won many other accolades. 3 years later, Braxtan and Company managed to cobble together a sequel called Return of the Ghostbusters. The film is a continuation of the Denver Ghostbusters story. This time, they are pitted against a man named Klaus Constantine, who wants to use a powerful amulet of Anubis for the sake of gaining its power. By the way, the amulet is actually a replica of the headpiece of the Staff of Ra from Raiders of the Lost Ark. Unlike the first film, this one manages to be very serious and at times dark. That goes with the pattern that the second part of the story is more darker than the first, refer to Empire Strikes Back. Plus, it introduces us to some new faces, such as Pavel Karnov, played by Joel Hansen, a replacement for Eugenio Fitzpatrick. I like the idea that he's a Russian, but also with Pavel being a former student of Constantine, it kind of leaves us guessing as to who his allegiance is with. Also, you have April Hunter, played by Ariel Brackfield, a woman who would eventually become Mrs. Hank Braxtan. April is a reporter who's hell-bent on getting an anchor position, but is forced against her will to be interviewing the Denver Ghostbusters. She soon becomes the object of affection for Neil Anderson. Ron Vischer as Klaus Constantine is pretty fascinating, and also very funny.
Hello, Channel 8? You might want to send someone down to the Mayan Theater. Quickly. The Ghostbusters are attacking the staff. No, the Ghostbusters. No, the Ghostbusters! They're attacking the Ghostbusters! They're taking their goddamn souls!
Now, Return of the Ghostbusters was made while Braxtan was still in film school, and the equipment was rented only for school projects. So in order to not get discovered for using the equipment for an extracurricular activity, Braxtan made a film called The Denver Ninja Posse and told the school that they had shot the film for months, when in fact they shot it over the course of one weekend. Using a budget of over $3,000, 8 months of shooting, and with over 200 CGI effects in the film, Return of the Ghostbusters was released on Halloween of 2007, following a screening at the Mayan Theater in Denver. Now, the one thing about these fan films that did for me as a fan was that it resurrected an idea that I had been wrestling with since 1991, the idea of pairing the Ghostbusters with the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. I had been thinking about it for a long time, ever since I saw the second Ninja Turtles movie, and wasn't terribly impressed with Turtles 3. So when sitting around with not a lot to do, I began to write down what I thought would be a pretty action-filled and incredible story about these two teams together in one story. Once I saw Hank Braxtan's films, I wanted to have the Denver Ghostbusters team up with the New York Ghostbusters, so I decided to incorporate them in my Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles meets the Ghostbusters story. While I was writing this story, I did manage to scribble out a few drawings depicting some of the scenes in the story. Basically, the story would open with April O'Neil getting mugged and her purse snatched by a couple of low-life thugs in Central Park. The Turtles would then show up and they would do what they do best. Once they're down for the count, a scream is heard in the Tavern in the Green. The Turtles discover two figures dressed as a Revolutionary War redcoat and a Confederate soldier. Thinking it's just two burglars dressed in costumes, the Turtles try to fight them, only to discover that they're actually ghosts. And that's where the Ghostbusters come in. The guys see them and decide that they're not a threat, and one by one they're introduced to each other. Egon asks where they came from, and the Turtles show them to their lair, which is not far from the Ghostbusters headquarters. And there they meet Splinter, and he tells them about their origins. The following night, the Turtles' arch-nemesis, the Shredder, has returned as a ghost after being killed at the end of Turtles 2, and is more powerful than anything both teams have ever come across. That's the basic gist of the story, and I managed to litter the story with some set pieces, such as a battle in the middle of Times Square, similar to the scene in Amazing Spider-Man 2 and Paul Feig's Ghostbusters, and a battle scene involving hypnotized criminals and spirits in the middle of Fifth Avenue. While I was writing it, I imagined a kind of flirty relationship between April and Venkman, and I was imagining Paige Turco as April because I thought she would look good in a scene with Bill Murray. So I had written a scene where April and Venkman dine at a fancy ballroom at the Plaza Hotel. So I also had April wear something like my junior prom date wore. One thing I tried to include in the story was an action sequence amongst beautifully dressed extras. What I'm saying is that I always like scenes in movies where you have an elegant location, such as a ballroom or a party or fancy restaurant, where you have dozens of extras dressed in the most beautiful dresses, outfits, and have an action sequence within that location and amongst these beautifully dressed people. One example of this is The Rocketeer, directed by Joe Johnston, where the Rocketeer is flying around this fancy-looking club and all hell is breaking loose. And also Batman Forever, with Batman crashing through the skylight and beating up Two-Face's thugs. So I wanted to emulate those scenes, but using the Ghostbusters. In order to do that, I had to have our main villain make a grand party-crashing entrance. So I concocted the idea of Shredder crashing this beautiful party and about to abduct April, and Shredder unleashes a swarm of black ghosts attacking the patrons, similar to the ghosts that come out of the Ark of the Covenant in Raiders of the Lost Ark. Once all the ghosts are trapped, Shredder reappears in a gigantic ghost form and steals April, leading up to a climax in an old graveyard. There, the Shredder unleashes 20 zombies from under the ground and evil spirits emerging from out of the gravestones. The Turtles go after the zombies, and the New York Ghostbusters bust the spirits. The Denver Ghostbusters, Pavel, Ed, and Neil, are about to take care of Shredder, but then he unleashes Gozer, but in the form of the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man. Because as later discussed in the video game,
when the necromantic shockwave summoned Gozer back to our plane, why didn't he assume a more effective destructor form immediately? I mean, the Marshmallow Man is scary, sure, but there has to be a better way to destroy the world. It's simple. When he enters our plane of existence, he must be locked into that form from our first encounter. One destructor form per god per dimension. I like it. Sounds like the kind of symmetry these things tend to operate on.
So now the Denver Ghostbusters have to take care of the Marshmallow Man. And once the zombies are destroyed and the ghosts trapped, Shredder opens up a portal to hell and unleashes these inhuman hands to go after April. But now is the time for the Ghostbusters to take action, and Shredder is then sucked into the portal. The Marshmallow Man is then still standing. Seeing no other alternative, the Denver Ghostbusters crosses streams and blows him up again. The group celebrates their victory, and we fade out. So if you want to take a look at Hank Braxtan's 2 films, or you want to read my fanfic, click on the link below. But until then, thanks for watching, and thank you, Hank Braxtan, for these amazing fan films.